And now after we have our skeleton working, so we know that we have a game with first user winning for first row, we don't need end-to-end test now anymore. I spoke about it a little bit at the start, but usually we use E2E test or browser test for testing navigation, for testing browser interaction, browser measurements and stuff, or testing API calls. And for start, like when we use outside in, so we start with a scenario with end-to-end test, and when we have our skeleton, we now will continue with a component test. So I don't need a browser anymore. I don't need a real browser. It is important to have a browser for the start, because there are stuff that when you write component test, for example, if I have a error in JavaScript, there might be a case that nothing is working, like your application is not working because of a JavaScript error, and your component tests are okay. So you need a real browser. You can test logs, you can test screenshots and image compare and stuff. So it is really useful to start and to have browser tests. But now let's go to faster tests, like to component tests, as we spoke before. We will use Node with JSDOM, and JSDOM, as we said, I want to show you a little bit about the environment. I heard that people are interested in how we set up this environment. So actually what I did here is I took create React app, and I have few things set up. The first one is it's not part of the TDD flow, but people were interested, so I think it might be interesting for some of you. So I'll just explain in few points. So Jest has a feature, a nice feature called projects, when you can actually, have few different environments running for the same project. For example, here I have one project for E2E tests with a specific setup for Puppeteer. I called it E2E. It has its test environment, test match. It runs against E2E.js. And for example, inside test environment, we have environment, which we set up just to work with Puppeteer here. I spoke a little bit before about this. Actually, what we did is we launched the browser once. Okay, so we won't launch it every time. It's expensive. And then we connect to the WebSocket as we did at start. Remember with WebSocket? So actually we're doing something similar. We're taking the same WebSocket and reusing it and connecting to the browser. Okay, and you have few methods to do it with Jest. You can either save this WebSocket URL somewhere on disk, or you can each time you can go to and do AJAX request to all, as we did before, to the port with version JSON, and take it from there, from the open browser. Okay, so this is a limitation of Jest, because Jest is running each suit in a contained environment. Okay, you can go and take a look in what I did here. So this was E2E, and we also have JSDOM environment for everything with spec. And here I have, for example, a bubble working and stuff for the JSDOM, and it's configured as JSDOM. Jest has JSDOM environment, which you can say JSDOM or Node or custom one, like here. This is a custom one I use. Okay, for Puppeteer I use a custom one. For JSDOM I just write JSDOM. It's already configured from Jest. And for unit tests I'm using Node environment. So it's pure Node. Okay, so I have 3 environments running. So if I run, and I wrote it with .unit. So when we'll have unit tests, I know it will run only with pure Node without JSDOM. Okay, sometimes it's important, not here in this case, but if you are using JSDOM and you don't need a browser, so you might have problems that you didn't expect, like you have window on your node it's awkward. So, okay, is this clear? Questions? So all the setup is actually in package.json and in test helpers. Okay, so you can take a look, and if you'd like, and you can ask me questions later as well. So now our first component test. Few words about component test. There are few methods to use them. You can actually use them as some kind of integration test for your whole application. So you will write test to app.js, and it will be some kind of black box. I won't get into the internals and to the inner components. And the advantage in this method is that I don't know, I'm not aware of the internal implementation. And then if I want to refactor, it will be quite easy. The disadvantage is sometimes you'll have to do more complicated setup to run this main component. Okay? The other approach is to test your dump component. So I can actually pass props into my dump component, and then I can have spies or whatever and test it as a small unit. Okay, it's more like unit tests than integration test. Okay, questions regarding this? So I can either test the whole application as integration test using my component test as black box, or I can go inside and test each component using props, passing it props and testing what I want inside. I will do the first approach. I will test my app. I will render it. Okay, we're using JSDOM and Enzyme. Enzyme, let's see, Enzyme is an Airbnb helper library. You're not obligated to use it, but it's nice. You can actually use it. It has all kinds of utils that you can use to mount component, for example, to render it, and then to have selectors on it. It's really nice. So now you need an adapter for it because we use React 16 here. So let's install what we need. So I'll import Enzyme and Enzyme React adapter. I have a ready-made. This is what I have with Create React App, just a skeleton. So I already installed it. So I just import Enzyme and the adapter, and then I will need to configure the adapter. Actually, I'll do something like I will take configure and mount. I will need mount here because I want to use mount to mount my component. And the first test will be something like we want the second player when second player clicks, we want to see O. Okay, this is our first component test. Okay, until now all clicks will lead to X. So should have O after second and now I have to mount my component, so I can have something like I'll have a wrapper here. Let's go to documentation and I'll show you what mount is. Mount is actually mounting it's rendering the component. You can either do it like this or just do render with DOM, with React DOM, or you can either use React test utils. So actually, all of them are doing the same thing behind the scenes. Like all of them are actually doing render at the end. So I will have, I wanted to show mount here from documentation. So mount. So mount is actually mounting the component and returns returns a wrapper that I can later use to select stuff. So this is the way to do it, and I can actually take later this wrapper and find elements, click, simulate stuff. This is what I will do. So let's do something like this here. I will have, but I will take the wrapper and put it on. And let wrapper and wrapper.mind, and I can actually do something like attach to and attach it to a div. I don't remember the syntax. Let's look at the example here. So just attach it, and now I will render our app. Okay, so I just render our app component, and now I want to start with registration. Okay, so I do something like wrapper dot find, and I want to find the simulation, the elements for registration, first user and second user. So I'm taking the data hook of P1 input, and I will simulate on change event. This is the way to work with Enzyme. Okay, this is Enzyme syntax, and I will pass it target with value of the first player. So I don't have a real event here. I will explain. So I don't have a real event here. So I'm simulating an event, and I'm sending the object that will be, remember that when we consumed this event here, inside game, inside app, no, inside registration. Sorry, I'm confused. So here we consumed this event, this onChange event, and we had e.target.value. So here we don't have a real browser. We don't actually click something. We simulate this kind of event. So we simulate an onChange, and we send an object with target value, and here we put player 1. So now when the event, the onChange event will be catched, so I'll get the target.value. Okay, understood? This is the way to do it. And now let's have player 2 with player 2, and now let's and now I need a click. It was new game, if I remember. New game? Mm-hmm. And simulate again, simulate a click. Okay, so now I started a new game, and now what I want to do is click on the first cell. Okay, and the first cell, and then another cell to see that I have a second player. So let's have something like wrapper dot find cell. So it's TD, and I want the first one, and I want to simulate a click here as well. Okay, questions regarding this?
Can I have questions?
Yeah, sure.
As far as it gets, we can test, for instance, form submission using Enzyme, right?
Can? What can?
Simulating different events, form submission.
Yeah.
And then, but we can do that as well using a Puppeteer, say, if I get card.
Yeah, of course. You can do everything here using Puppeteer as well, yeah.
But what is the main difference between simulating form submission using Enzyme and using Puppeteer, for instance?
So the main difference is, like, both of them will work. The main difference is in one place you have a real browser in Puppeteer. Here you have JSDOM. So as I said, usually you will like a browser for some of your tests to see that everything is working without errors, but you don't want a lot of them. because they are heavier. Like although it's headless, like Puppeteer is headless, and it is pretty fast, JSDOM tests are much faster. They are just Node, okay, without a real browser. So those are much faster. So usually in large application, you can have hundreds of those tests, of those JSDOM tests, which will be really, really fast. And if you have hundreds of Puppeteer tests, it will be slow because it uses a real browser. It uses it will render your whole application, even that is headless. It will be heavy. So we will want several browser tests, not a lot of them. You can do everything in both like Puppeteer or JSDOM, but most of the tests will be here, okay? Here or in unit test if you have logic, specific logic. Okay, is this answering your question? You had a question?
In general, so these two approaches have the same points, like you can test your application that way with Puppeteer and with JSDOM, but as I understand, if we have large application, we can't test it by JSDOM, as I understand.
You can.
Or we can.
Yeah, no, you can use, even in large application, you can use.
But you do not 100% be sure that it will work in browser if you test in JSDOM.
Again, sorry?
If you test the application via JSDOM,
yeah.
You do not have
a real browser.
100% be sure that it's working.
Yeah, of course. You won't be sure, so you won't.
You want to be sure you.
Yeah, so in ideal world, if Puppeteer or browser tests were fast, so you could write everything in browser test and you'll have more certainty that everything is working. But if you have a lot of tests, it will be heavy. It will take a lot of time. Sometimes they can be flaky if it's complicated. And then usually I would like to, so you usually would like to have few of them, not a lot of them. And most of your tests, like browser tests, letting you know that everything is connecting, like all the dots are connected. And then you'll have component tests and everything inside for inner logic. It will be much faster and much more like efficient. Yeah.
Like integration test, while this is unit test.
Yeah, it's more like unit tests.
Continue. If me as a beginner, this is testing, my applications. So it's no reason to, to understand how to write tests. I can use any
of
approach.
Course.
So it's not serious concerns to use one of it instead of other one. If I want to learn how to test so I just take.
You mean if you want to learn how to test your application, you can use either of them.
Yeah.
But usually in real world, you won't use just one of them. A lot of times, for example, to write browser tests, another point. To write browser tests might be more not only heavy in terms of time, it can be more complicated to set up. Because sometimes I have a page that I cannot get directly. I have to fill a form or something, and you have to do a few steps. And to test only the component will be much easier because you can pass props to it or can just render it like here. So you don't need all the flow. Okay, so it might be easier. Yeah.
What's the difference between using Jest and using Enzyme? Because in Jest you can also render some components.
Yeah, so Jest and Enzyme, the question was what's the difference between Jest and Enzyme. So it's completely different thing. Jest is the runner here. We use Jest to run our function, our tests, and we use Jest for configuring JSDOM and everything. Enzyme is just an helper library for rendering, for mounting. Yeah. So you don't have to use Enzyme here. Enzyme is just a convenient wrapper, so you can actually mount instead of doing React DOM.render. I'm doing mount, and then I can. Yeah, it's more like jQuery like syntax. So you can use find and simulate. For example, if I wanted to use Enzyme, so simulate is really nice. You don't have to use it. It's just for convenience. Okay, but it's completely different from Jest. Jest is the test runner here. It's not the same. Yeah.
Here, I have a question about like testing libraries. If you use some library or, for example, like a set of components, do you test them in your application, or you just realize that that library should be covered with tests?
So if I understand correctly, you mean if I use like a component library to use here? So the question was if I will test it here.
Yeah.
So I will not test it here. I will test it inside the library, but you should test it during the flow. So it's two different things. Like I will have inside this library, I will check that everything is functioning. Here I will trust it. I will not test inside that click is working. But I will use my application clicking here and seeing that it works. So it's part of the flow. It will be tested, not directly, I mean. Okay? But it's not, I saw people like putting here a component from some library and starting testing that click works. So this is not something I will test here. Like if I bring a component from other library, I won't test that it actually works. It's useless. So it's.
I know just some guys which ensure and like the libraries they use with tests. Sometimes it helps.
So they test the. Okay.
Not maybe in some scenarios, but they do much testing.
So maybe if they don't trust the library they use, so maybe
But sometimes
they don't have to use so they maybe shouldn't use this library. So cool. So I clicked the first cell, and let's click the second cell. Okay, so I clicked first cell and sorry, no, it doesn't really matter. And now I want to expect that this cell, by the way, you see that everything here, it's not asynchronous anymore. In Puppeteer, everything was asynchronous. It's using WebSockets behind the scenes. Everything is asynchronous. Here you don't have anything, like it's JSDOM, and you just render and do stuff. You don't need it. So I took the element at the first place, and I'm checking for text to be O. And it should fail. Wow, Prettier is doing like, whoa. So it should fail now because I would expect here to see I did something wrong.
Mostly, even on changes should be changed.
Where? On. Maybe it should be. I have a change, right? Thanks. Yeah, exactly. And this is what I wanted to see. I see that I expected to see O, but I don't see O. I don't have O yet. So I got X instead. So let's fix it. Let's go to our app.js. And here what I want to have is current player now. I want to have another state, which is current player, which start with X. And let's use current player here as well. This dot state dot current player. Okay. And the only thing I have to do next is to set the next state to be the other player. Okay, so I'll have something like const next player, and it will be if the current player is X, I will change it to be O. Otherwise, I will use X. Okay? And now I'm saying that current player is next player. I will set state to be next player. And we are green. Okay? So now I know that each click will produce different player. XO, XO. Okay? Questions? And as you remember from end-to-end tests, this test is it's not readable, it's not clean, I don't like it. So let's use drivers here as well, okay? So I'll start with driver here and I will refactor it to a different file later. So I use app driver. And inside, let's start with inside I want to have something like let wrapper. And so it won't be like this anymore. And I will return an object with methods. So I have, for example, render, which gets a node and render it. Okay. And actually, by the way, I'm using the attach to method because I will do after the test, after each test, I will do detach, okay? Detach is actually calling the, let's see. Detach is actually important because it will call the unmount component at node method, okay? So it's a way of cleaning your tests, okay? So I just rendered my application. I will do something like wrapper equals mount, and I can actually return, I don't need to return anything here yet. So here I will use render now. I have to initialize it, so before each I have app driver. Actually, I'm not sure if I need this abstraction here, even this, like, I'm not sure I need it, but let's stay with it for now. I mean, I could just use methods without a wrapper of a function. So I just could put methods and without anything, but I have a method which returns an object with methods. I mean, I'm not sure I need this abstraction. In browser tests, I was passing page here, so I won't have to pass it in each test. So I need this abstraction. Usually I don't like to put too much abstraction in my test, so I could just write methods like render here without any, although I need it for wrapper, so it's okay. So I did render. Where is render? Driver.render, and I pass it my app. Okay, and now it should be green already. What did I break here? I have a problem in my okay. So it's still red, but for the right reason, because wait.
You should move let wrapper outside.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I will still use the driver dot new game with player 1 and player 2, and new game will contain this. It doesn't matter how you do it as far as you use drivers. Like you can do so this is our new game, okay? And now I can have something like click SL at, so driver.click SL at index. Questions? Sorry? Where should I have wrapper? Index. And I will click a cell at 1, so I don't need this anymore. And now the test it will be much more readable and without selectors. So new game, click a cell at 0, click a cell at 1, and here I will have driver.get cell text at.
Yaniv,
Yeah.
so using drivers is kind of convenience refactoring for better visibility, right?
Yeah, it's also for like visibility, and also if later on if I like change something in my implementation in my code, like selectors and stuff, I don't have to go over all like places and refactor only in one place. Okay? And actually it should, like, you could do it from start. Like you can start with drivers. I prefer starting and show you like how it's done like first time, and then use drivers. You can start with drivers from the first time if you'd like. So I have get cell at.
Where are you storing drivers?
So it's up to you. Like the question was where do you store your drivers?
Yes.
So it's up to you. Usually it should be in a separate file. I will separate it to a different file and require it. If it's becoming complicated, you can store it like if you need to reuse some parts of the driver, so you can use it in a different folder, but it's up to your implementation. It's more an idea. Like drivers is more like an idea than implementation detail. Like you can implement it however you want. I saw people implement it with a lot of abstractions, with inheritance and factories. So you had factory to create drivers, and then you inherit from one driver to another because you have hierarchy in the DOM. For me, I like it simple. I like it like functions without a lot of abstractions, but a lot of people are using more abstractions over drivers. It's up to you. There are no rules here. Like you should choose whatever fits you. So get a cell at. We don't need wrapper here anymore. And now we are green. Okay? So we refactor here to use. And now remember the test was really ugly. Now the test is readable. I have render, new game. I did 2 clicks, and I expected the first cell to be O. Okay? Our next test will be for O player to win. Okay? So second player to win. So I'll have test second player should win, which is actually pretty easy now because I can actually use, and again I will show you how if you want, but again if you have logic that is happening in few places, you can have it inside before each in a describe, so I can show you. So now I will do the clicks. Remember, I want second player to click to win, and as you understand now, it's becoming a little bit more complicated. It's a simple task here, but in real world, setup might be a little bit more complicated. So now the setup should be, I have to think about it and open the, where is it? Open the game, and I want second player to win. So I'm starting with 3, and then 0, 3, 0, 4, 1, and now I need another cell because I don't want first player to win. So let's say 8 or something, and then 2. Okay, this will be the use case. But as you see, if I want to have simulations of all the logic, like cross like crossing and columns and stuff, it will, as you can understand that it might be more difficult. And that's the reason that after this test, I will have all the logic inside the unit test. It's much more reasonable. Otherwise, I will have to start thinking of all the scenarios of clicking, and it will start being a little bit more complicated. Okay, is this understood? So I will do what we said. I will click 3 and then 0 and then this 0 and then 4 and then 1 and then 8 and then 2. And now I expect driver dot get winner message to be computer 1. Okay, not computer, sorry, player 2. Okay, and now I expect the test to be read. I will implement this method, of course, in the driver. So winner message is wrapper dot find data hook of winner dot text. Okay, so I'm taking the text from winner message, and now I expect, I expect the error message saying that text, which I used here, text that I used here for this selector should meant to be run on a single node, 0 found instead. Why 0? Because we don't have winner message, because, okay, is this understood? I can show you the scenario just so it will be clear. This is our red test. I just want to show you that it's the correct reason for the red test. So we did something like this, right? And no winner message yet, because O, this is our red test. O did not win, okay? So the message saying text meant to work on a single node, but it didn't find anything because no winner message. Cool, so I just want to figure out, it's important to understand that the test was failing for the correct reason. And let's fix it. Let's go to app.js, and here, remember we test for every cell in the first row to equal x. And now I want to figure out if it equals current player, right? So if it is current player, I want the winner to be current player. I cannot cheat anymore here, okay? I want the winner to be current player. And then, inside message, I cannot cheat anymore as well, right? I cheated, I said always one message, player 1 won. So now I will have to have something like this dot, and we can refactor. It's ugly currently. We can refactor to a method or to a component. If state winner is x, so have this one, otherwise have the second one. Okay, is this clear? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit ugly, I will fix it, but if the winner is x, so say player 1 won, otherwise say player 2 won, okay? And I have my condition for winner, so I did not actually add any logic here. I won't show anything else. And it's green. Okay? Cool. Questions? So last part before your workshop. I know it's intense, like to listen so much. So we are like at the end of my part, and it's soon we'll have your part. Last part that I want to show you, as I said, if we go to the test here, I see that it's pretty much annoying to write all this in order to test something. If I want to test diagonal now, for example, I have to start thinking what is the scenario, and it's annoying. And this is a simple scenario. So in this case, for all game logic now, I will extract the logic to a method, and I will do unit tests on it. Okay? I write all this logic using small function and small function tests. So let's demonstrate it, and this is my last part, and then we'll have lunch and you will start working. Okay? So let's refactor first. So I'll take the logic from here, the winning logic. So this is actually my winning logic, right? It says every cell at the first row should be current player, okay? So let's refactor this to be in a function. Let's start with the function here and then extract it to a different file. So let's say something like const page status, and I wanted to get only a board. This doesn't really matter, but you can actually pass this method current player as well. But I think it will be cleaner if we have not page, why page, game. So it will get a board and decide which player won if someone won. Otherwise, later you'll have a tie or other scenarios. But for now, it will get a board, and it should decide which is the winner. So I won't pass it current player. Instead, I'll do something like is win. I will have another helper method which will get the symbol and will return this logic. I didn't copy it. So this is only a refactor, but it's an important refactor in order to prepare for a unit test. So I'm using another method, internal method for help, which will decide if a certain symbol will win. And now I will say, if is win for x, return x, and if is win for y, not y, o, return o. What did I do? Is wix. I got is wix. And now I will call this method from here, and I will say if game status with my board is actually current player, so current player is the winner, and I'm green. Okay, so I did a refactor here, and I see that I didn't break anything in the refactor. I can actually refactor stuff here and be certain that everything is okay because tests are still green. Okay, questions about it? So let's go and extract it to a different file, so it will be easier to test. Let's call it game service, and let's have this method here. Let's do default for now, but doesn't really matter. So I extracted it to a different file, and now I will import it. And let's see that the tests are still green, and they are green, okay. So I refactored to a different file and see how fun it is. I can move stuff around and I can be sure that everything is working without opening the browser. Cool. And now let's add a game service, gameservice.unit.js for unit test. This one is Node, is pure Node. I will have game require. I will require it from game service. And now I can actually test. Let's write one green test for existing. Usually this is not TDD. I'm just writing one green test to demonstrate that it is working, and then your part will be to continue. Okay, so let's do test should win for first row of X. Not sure about the name. And here what I can actually do is call this method with a specific board that I want. This is much nicer than what we had in the component test. So I can just put whatever I like here. I can just put something like this. And it's much easier actually because I don't need all the simulates, clicking. And I don't need the other player as well because I don't care. Something like this, and then I can just expect game status using this board to be X. And let's see. Game status is not a function. I had some problem. Game status is not a function.
Game service, you require game service.
Game service, but I exported game. Sorry? No, it's default here. Maybe I should just import it. Maybe I did something wrong here. I did something wrong, never mind. So I see that it's green, my unit test is green. And now I can actually easily, I wanted to demonstrate it like this. It's much nicer to see, but prettier won't let me, I guess. So you can just see you can actually see the game that we're simulating here, okay? It is really nice. And now I can have a rectangle, diagonal, sorry, like this. It's really nice to test, really easy and nice. So I can have another test like this, which will test diagonal, and another test for, you got the idea, right? Mm-hmm. So it's much easier than starting thinking about all the clicks and so all game logic, diagonals, columns, everything can be here, okay? Questions regarding this? Yeah.
I have some instruction form of data, like the drivers you use for extracting out, I don't know, Puppeteer and JSDOM, and do you have some instruction for mocking data? Yes.
So it's a good question. The question was if we have some structure for mocking data, for this data. So we have drivers like you saw for testing. So we use a builder pattern for that in a lot of places, but this is only an implementation detail. So people are use a builder class, for example, or builder function, which will give you stuff. So you can have a builder dot, or I don't know, let's game builder dot with game, and then build. This is a pattern I saw a lot, something similar, and then this will produce your board. So this is an example that can be for mocking data. So if you have a lot of data, you can have some kind of a builder which will provide your data if it's a complicated stuff that you have to build. Okay, so we use it a lot. And actually, I'm pretty much finished. I want to show you your task before lunch is ready. So I will show you your part. So actually, there is a README. There is a React TDD workshop under my repository, Yaniv Efraim. And actually, there are few branches here. There is a clean start, which I started with. Master is actually where you will have to start from. And there is a solution example. I prefer only if you get stuck, go and look at the solution. Okay, it's only for reference with everything. And actually, this is your part. You will have to clone, or maybe I prefer that you fork this repository, because later on it will be nice. We can see your work, okay? And then, as you saw, npm start and npm run test watch in two different terminals in order to work in watch mode. And this is all we had so far. We had browser test for starting a new game. We have a browser test for X. Remember, it was the baby step. And then we had X for winning a game. And then we have a component test for O, and component test for O winning the game. And then we had a refactor for a unit test that you just saw here for game logic. And your tasks are to complete game logic, like have all unit tests for game logic here. It doesn't have to be the exact same order, but at the exact same order, I mean like those bullets, but it can be like this. Another test for verifying that you cannot press a non-empty cell. Because here, for example, you can see that if I press the same cell again, whoa, voodoo. Not voodoo, but funny. Okay, so you should have a component test for that. And then write a component test for a tie, because if you wrote a unit test for a tie, it's not enough, because you have to see that the dots are connected. We don't have a message for a tie, and we don't have the logic it's only for winning now. And another test to specify color or a border for current player. Remember the example I showed you at start? So current player is marked in some border or something. Hiding registration form and game. If you remember, let's go to the final example. Let's go to the final example with the great UI. So here the game is hidden at start. So you should write a test and implement that. And after you press new, registration was removed, like hidden. And then you have the game. So you should have two tests for that. One test for hiding game before game start. And second, for hiding registration after game start, okay? Before game start, we hide the game. After, we hide the registration. And we have two bonus parts. One is to write a browser test for saving and loading existing game state. Remember that we had it here. So I can actually do something like this and save, and then refresh and load. And it will load the state, okay? And you can use, usually we do it with server. Here we don't have time, so we use just local storage or something. And last bonus is to have a component test for showing, it should be a browser test, because I want you to, I will fix it. I want you to show a counting of winning for each player. And it should also persist. If you need persistent, you need browser to refresh the page. It's another scenario that you can only test with browser. Okay, you need a real browser to navigate, click some stuff, win, show the winning counter for first player, for example, then refresh and see it again, and then win for the second player, for example. So this is another bonus task. Okay, so I would really like if you can work in pairs. So you can fork, each pair will fork the repository, and then you can actually put pull request or something, and I can see your work. It can be really nice. Okay, so really try to work in pairs and fork, and we have, I'm here, and we have two mentors. We have Roman and Artyom. Yeah, Roman is here and Artyom is here. We will help you with any question you have. And if you have problems with environment, this is all based on open source, like Create React App and all kinds of jest and stuff that I put. But if you still have problems, I have a ready-made Cloud9 environment, which I prepared, which you can just log in and start working without any setup. It's really nice. I can even show you, just so you know. Never mind, it's not interesting. If some of you, like for example, Windows users or something, it's really a nice environment. You can just start working there. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
How to organize your test suite, like in a bigger application where you have models, components?
Yeah, it's a great question. How you organize your tests? So basically, it's up to you. Usually, end-to-end tests we put in a different folder. We have a folder for end-to-end test, browser test, but it's not mandatory. You can put it inside the component. And usually, we like to put components in one folder for component with its CSS and with its component test for it. And also, you can, if your logic for that, it's less common, but if you have some end-to-end test that is related to this component, you can put it there as well. But usually, end-to-end tests are more big, more large, so it's not possible to put them. This is the reason they are in a different folder. Okay? So this is usually how it's done. Yeah, questions? More questions? Yeah.
And when you find bug, can you explain like TDD process for bugs?
Yeah, great question. You have a T-shirt?
No, I have.
So you can have a T-shirt. Great question, because it's really important. It is called regression test. So if we find a bug, TDD is not bulletproof. So you will find issues, and when we find the issue, we'll write a test for it. We call it regression test. I will write a specific test for this issue, so it won't happen again. And then I will test it. It will be red. I will test this issue, fix it, and that's regression test. That's the approach. That's it actually. And as I said before, we have like several levels of protection. We have your test, which you should write, which contains browser test, component test, unit test, and then we have also automation. Automation is running on a bigger context, because for example, if here for my application I will need a login, so in my test I don't need to log in. I can just navigate to some page. But if automation will be in a larger scope, it will be on real production. This is pre-production. Usually automation tests are running on production or maybe on RC, like in pre-production, but on actual servers. And it will actually run on real database. So it's different tests. And those are really important as well, but it's not developed by developers usually. It's developed by QA. And if automation will find you a bug, we write a regression test for that bug. Okay?
Which environment do you use for end-to-end tests? Like if you have servers, you have to have some environment like, I don't know, separate server which will you connect with?
Yeah, so we have local. So the question was what we are doing when we have servers. So usually this workshop, I didn't talk about it, but this workshop is part of a crash course that I'm conducting at Wix. So it's a whole week. So there we have a server. So usually when you have a server, you start local server and you work with this local server. You don't work with real production server in this case. And this, it can be simple express server. By the way, you can actually have, I saw some teams that didn't have a server. They just served everything. No, this is only for statics. Puppeteer is a feature for intercepting requests. So you can just intercept your request. So all statics are served from Express server, for example, they serve them from Puppeteer. They just use Puppeteer for that. That's it. So we use local servers, which we start as part of the process of testing. More questions? Yeah.
If we have to handle the interaction of our component and the environment in which it's stored. For example, local storage. Do we have to mock it on the node side, on server side, where the tests are run?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So how do you use, if I understand correctly, like I can take it a little bit to a different scenario. If I have a component test and I do a call to XHR call to server, Ajax call to our server, how will I handle it? So there are several approaches. One approach is if you don't use a component test as integration test, you can just skip that part and put props into your dump component, and then you don't need it. But the other approach, which I like better, is to actually try to mock as far as possible. So for example, if my component will call server now, I will use a library like knock, for example. If you know, knock is actually intercepting. It's monkey patching the XHR, the network calls. So it will intercept the call, and then I can return whatever I like. So I can say, given a call to certain API address, intercept it and return value. And then this is the way I like to deal with component tests which have, for example, calls to a server. Okay, and knock, for example, is working on the lowest level of node, so it intercepts all HTTP calls. And JSDOM is actually using XHR because we'll use XHR, but JSDOM is implementing XHR with HTTP. It's a little bit, if you understand, it's a little bit difficult. Never mind. Not related to TDD, so yeah.
Do you use snapshots, and if yes, when I should use?
Yeah, so snapshots is a great feature. So, but it doesn't fit any all scenarios. I can give you a nice scenario that we use it with Puppeteer. So for example, we have a large refactor that we do now for our UI part, for our layouts, and the layouts are moving a little bit, and we change it from JavaScript engine to CSS engine, which is much faster and much better. So we test all the location, like the rect DOM. We take all the measurements, and then you can actually do you can take the JSON with all the data from Puppeteer, and then you can have snapshot for it, and then you know that you won't break it. So this is just an example, nice example for that. But snapshots are really nice for you can test wherever it fits you can use it.
But if something, it prevent you to introduce new changes
inside structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the limitation. Yeah, this is the one limitation. By the way, we do use something else we use a tool for comparing images. So instead of JSON, sorry? Yeah, so we have a different tool. It's similar but different. We compare images. So for example, if you have a library of components, you can actually, this is what I said before on Storybook. So we render this component, and then we compare images before and after and see that we did not break the UI of the image. But those tests are not for every scenario because they tend to be flaky. For example, for flakiness, which is really funny, if you have cursor inside your input, so it might be flaky because the test might take the snapshot, the image with cursor on or off, and those are flaky. So we have a feature for disabling this, but those might be flaky. So each scenario with its own tooling, I guess. Anything else? Yeah.
So taking Puppeteer as a testing tool, Puppeteer is an instrument that makes testing, moves our testing session more closer to real world examples.
exactly. Yeah.
So, is it okay to use development bundle version for puppeteer testing, or it is maybe better to use production one?
Okay, so the question was, I repeat the question. The question was if for Puppeteer end-to-end browser test, we will use production bundle or development bundle, right? So while developing, it's a matter of where do we want to test now. When I develop, I want to test my current code, not production code. Before it's pre-production. So I'm using development bundle. This is what I did here. I'm using development bundle only. The ones that are using production code is automation usually. They use browser test with production code, with production bundles and everything. For me, for us, we don't use it. Like as a developer, you use your code like your current code and not what will be in production. Okay? So you can have like, let's have lunch because I guess food is getting cold. And you'll have time for questions. We are here and you have about 3 hours after it to finish all your tasks. So good luck and thank you.